All right. I think we're live. If anyone can hear me, push one in the chat. All right, got a confirmation. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is Black Geopolitics, episode 866 or 886. Sorry. Please hit the like button, come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. There's a link in the chat if you want to join the panel in this discussion. This will be a real quick one. I apologize for being late. Had some technical difficulties earlier. But I definitely wanted to make sure we put this on our radar that Iran retaliates against the Zionist regime. And we knew that this was going to happen. The attack on the embassy about a week or so ago was a shot across the bow. And I think that here's my analysis on this before I even go into this. I think that what Israel is trying to do is drag the United States into a Middle Eastern conflict with Iran, because Israel does not have the ability to fight that far of a distance from their borders. Now, bashing Palestinians and, firing missiles into Lebanon, and that's easy. But if you actually had to go up against a more equal power like Iran, that's very difficult, primarily because the distance is too far, and the consequences are too grave, because we don't really know how far this can go, right? And so Iran has tactical capabilities that are, almost equal to that of Israel, short of a no-fly zone. And I say that because Iran's air force is in shambles, primarily because of the sanctions. They haven't had the ability to rebuild their air force, since 1979. They had the F-14 Tomcat, which was an American product, and even that didn't go very far because they had just received it, before the revolution. And once the revolution came around, all, the supply chain came to an end. And so ultimately what I'm saying here is that I think that Israel wants the United States to get drawn into a conflict, and the Biden administration doesn't need a conflict on his watch, primarily because they don't want to go into November into a major conflict, like getting into a fight with Iran over Israel. They just don't see the value in it, primarily because it would disrupt the supply chains. All of your gas, oil, and energy prices would go through the roof. It would be cataclysmic from an economic standpoint. United States is just not interested in that. Israel is interested in that, mostly because Benjamin Netanyahu needs to stay in power, or else he's going to be indicted and brought into court, and he doesn't want to go through that. And so all I'm saying here is that Iran has the capability to respond, and they are, and we can get into that real quick. But I think that the problem here is that the Biden administration is playing this, a lot more tightly than what they are with, let's say, Gaza, right? With Gaza, you can really, punish the Biden administration for being complicit in that. With Iran, they don't really want to get into a fight. I don't think anybody wants to get into a fight on that side of the fence, primarily because it doesn't serve their interests. Okay. Iran and Saudi Arabia have made peace. Um, and China was the broker on that. So Saudi Arabia doesn't really want to get into, be dragged into this either, primarily because they haven't, signed on to the Abraham Accords that the rest of the Arab sellouts have already done. So for them, this is something that's unwanted. Um, Iraq is not really interested um, in a major conflict either, because they're still trying to rebuild their country, right? And in Syria, they're still picking up the pieces from what happened a week or so ago. So who's really interested in this ultimately is just Israel. And so Israel really is bringing this on themselves. I don't think that the United States is really all that interested in retaliation over drones. I just don't see that. Primarily because if they were really interested in the conflict, they would have already taken out Iran, a few years ago. But they already had the JCPOA. But when they had the JCPOA, that was agreed on with Israel in the same room. So, and this is during the Obama administration, I'm saying. Then you fast forward to Trump, the Trump administration. Trump tore up the JCPOA. That was the beginning of all of this. Okay. That was the beginning of all of this. You had a moment of peace and clarity during the final days of the Obama administration. Once this other guy got into the White House, he tore all that stuff up, all of the agreements and documentation up. And now we're here trying to figure out, what the next steps are going to be, because realistically speaking, no one gains anything from a fight of this size. Russia is kind of pinned down with Ukraine. I think that's going to be over and done with before the end of the year. China would see this as a legitimate reason to send their warships into the Strait of Hormuz, as well as the Red Sea, because they have to protect their shipping and supplies as well in the supply chain. And so they don't really want to get into a conflict. Russia doesn't really want any more aggression because they have to rebuild their own military logistics as we know it, because they lost a lot of tanks, they lost a lot of soldiers. They don't really have it right now. Maybe 5 years from now, but not right now. They don't really want to get into a conflict, because if they attack Iran, Russia would be dragged into it because they have to cover their rear flank. And then China would be brought into this. And then you start talking about Pakistan. And then you start talking about UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. All of these countries would be dragged right into it. Who wants to really get involved? Right now, Jordan and Egypt have closed off their airspace. They don't want anything flying over their airspace for the most part. So what does that mean ultimately is that people are not interested, other than Israel, only because Netanyahu wants to sit in power. So I just find these things to be really interesting, that some of the pundits on here, at least on YouTube, are saying like, that Iran started this or something like that. They make it seem as if Iran has no legitimacy in global affairs, and I find that to be a bit dubious, primarily because the JCPOA was a legitimate factor. Why did they tear that up? I don't know. Israel has their own objective separate from the United States, but dragging the United States into a conflict right now, I don't think that that's going to work very well for them. Any sort of escalation and aggression is just going to make things a lot more costlier for all of your logistics coming through Strait of Hormuz, coming through the Red Sea, coming through the Mediterranean. Who really wants to pay $2,000 for an iPhone, just because Israel wants to have a fight? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You can't forget about Turkey and the European Union. They probably don't want any of this either. Right. And so I don't know. I think that Netanyahu's days are kind of numbered at this point. Um, and I don't see this ending anytime soon, primarily because, okay, the drones reach Israel. According to this, drones have been shot down. Let me get into this right now because I think that it's appropriate to just go through the headlines for right now. This is from RT. Iran attacks Israel, live updates. Tehran has launched retaliatory strikes following a deadly airstrike that killed 2 Iranian generals early this month. Let me zoom in on this. Iran has launched a wave of drones toward Israel after American officials warned that hundreds of drones and missiles could rain down on the Jewish state over the weekend. Iran accused Israel of carrying out an airstrike on its consulate in the Syrian capital of Damascus earlier this month. The strike killed 7 officers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds force, including 2 high-ranking generals. Israel stuck to its usual policy of silence on extraterritorial territorial assassinations, but is widely believed to have been behind the attack. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, vowed to deal Israel a slap in the face in response, and American officials warned on Friday that Tehran could be gearing up for a massive drone and missile strike on Israel's soil in the following 24 to 48 hours. The Iranian response appeared to begin at midday on Saturday when IRGC commandos seized an Israeli-linked container ship in the Strait of Hormuz. I said this earlier, right? Said that. So this is from a few minutes ago. Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, has condemned the Iranian attack, accusing Tehran of violating the UN Charter and urging the Secretary General Antonio Guterres to act. This is from about an hour ago, or at least in their time. U.S. President Joe Biden has concluded a meeting of the National Security Council in the White House Situation Room, releasing a brief statement to proclaim a ironclad commitment to Israel's security, whatever that means, right? This goes back 90 minutes. The British military has deployed additional forces to the Middle East amid the Iranian attack on Israel. The country's defense ministry said London has been actively working with its regional partners in the interest of de-escalation, the ministry noted. Quote, we have moved several additional Royal Air Force jets and air refueling tankers to the region. These will bolster Operation Shader, which is the UK's existing counter-Daesh operation in Iraq and Syria. In addition, these UK jets will intercept any airborne attacks within range of existing missions as required, the ministry explained. This goes back 3 hours ago. More than 100 Iranian drones have been down outside of Israel by US and UK, an unnamed Israeli defense official told the country's army radio. So this is interesting, right? Let me stop here. This is interesting. If that was the case, right? Why would those those Iranian drones, the 100 Iranian drones that they have downed, they didn't specify which ones. Why would those drones be downed in the Middle East, but not in, let's say, Ukraine, right? We know that those drones have been very effective in Ukraine, primarily because they've been knocking out all those Ukrainian tanks. Even the new American tanks that have shown up, the French tanks that have shown up, and the British tanks that have shown up, as well as the German tanks that have shown up, they have all been taken out by the same Iranian drones that the Russians had acquired. So how is it possible that they can take down these 100 Iranian drones? And there's no evidence of this, right? There's, no one's posting any videos of it. There's no pieces that they've picked up. I don't see the evidence to back that up. Even the source is unnamed, right? An anonymous U.S. official confirmed the claim to to ABC News, stating several unmanned aircraft were shot down by the American military. The official did not reveal any exact figures. And that's my point. It's nice that you can say that, but prove that with the evidence, right? We saw it in Ukraine, all of those tanks, being taken out by, the same Iranian drones that the Russians had acquired. How is it possible that the same defense systems that were sent to the Ukraine to defend Ukraine weren't able to take out those drones, but suddenly, those same defense systems that are in the Middle East are somehow taking down 100 drones? I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that personally. No evidence. I don't see it. It doesn't exist to me personally. And so what I'm saying here is this. I don't think, first of all, we don't even know what kind of drones they have. The Shahed 238 is the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones that Iran has, that is very lethal. Probably has a 45-pound warhead on it, right? That's not that bad, in terms of its lethality on a target. That can take out a tank. We know that the 136s, the Shahed 136s, can take out a tank. So I'm not sure why all of a sudden now, 100 drones are coming our way and let's shoot them all down. Well, why didn't you shoot them down over Ukraine? What was going on there, right? And none of it is adding up to me at all. I think it's a lot of fluff. And second of all, why would Iran telegraph this idea that they're going to somehow launch 100 drones at this time and this day, and you guys better be ready? Like, who launches an attack like that, right? Who launches an attack like that from a military strategy standpoint? Nobody does that, right? And so I think there's a lot of fluff here. I think this, I'm not saying that Iran has not launched any drones, but I do think that there's a lot of fluff in a lot of the reporting, primarily because there's no evidence of anybody of any of these drones being shot down. And plus, it's hard to shoot these drones down in the first place because they don't necessarily emit the same footprint that a traditional cruise missile would, right? A Raytheon Tomahawk cruise missile, it's easy to detect on radar because of the size of it. Even though it flies at a lower altitude than a traditional missile, it's easier to detect from a radar standpoint if you're using sonar. But a drone like you're seeing right here, this Shahed 136, that's more difficult. This is one of the reasons why the Ukrainians have such difficulty taking them down, primarily because they don't have the ability to really monitor all these drones. Plus, these drones have AI to them. I think the latest ones have AI. And so they can spot their targets without any sort of external management to them, right? You don't need a pilot. You just set the coordinates and then tell it what it needs to look for, and it will look for it. And if it finds it, it will take it out. And so that's really what those drones are capable of doing. And they're cheap too. These drones are not that expensive. These drones are probably what, $2,500, $3,000, maybe $5,000 at most. When you start talking about, Israel's Iron Dome, you're talking about a missile that costs at least $1 million. $1 million missile to shoot down a $5,000 drone doesn't really add up, right? Financially speaking, for Israel, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so what we're probably walking into now is a drone war. You have countries launching drones that can't necessarily be detected. And they have the technology now, with large language models, open CV, open computer vision, the ability to take commercial hardware off the shelf from your local tech shop and put together a massive ordinance of weapons with this lethality. That was unheard of 10 years ago. Even 5 years ago, that was unheard of. Okay. And plus, you're talking about 100 drone swarm, right? This is what it says right here. Iran launches a swarm of kamikaze drones at Israel. Well, here's the deal. just technically speaking, you can program all those drones to work as what we call a platoon. And a platoon would fly in concert with each other, and they would look for their targets, and you might take out the first couple ones if you can hear them, but overall there's no way for you to determine where they're coming from or where they are, because they don't have a same the same you know booster engine, an afterburner booster engine like most traditional missiles do. You're talking about, these engines on these planes, for all intents and purposes, are like scooter engines. 49 cc, 35 cc engines, with enough fuel, with 10 gallons of fuel in it, that can go a pretty far distance. Most scooters, and I'm just saying, using scooters as a reference, they can go 100 miles, on 2-3 gallons of fuel, typically speaking. You give something like this 5 gallons, 10 gallons of fuel, that's going to go 500 miles. That's a long way, right? Especially if it's programmed with artificial intelligence and has the ability to find its target undetected from radar surveillance, traditional radar surveillance. That's difficult to find, because we don't know where they're coming from. They say they're launching them from Iran's territory, which could be in North Iran, closer to the closer to the Caspian Sea, or probably in Iraqi territory for all we know. So all of that being said, I just find some of these some of the reporting to be very dubious. I don't see how it's even possible for them to even detect any of these drones now, but they can, they suddenly couldn't do it in Ukraine. So, oh, let me bring these folks in here. I see folks trying to get in. Yeah, I just, some of these stories are just outrageous. I don't know where they're coming from with this. Who launches a military attack, and telegraphs all that information out to the public? Why would they say that? I'll get this person some time to get their mic together. But it's just interesting that Israel wants to drag the United States into a global conflict just to save themselves. I don't see that happening. I think, Israel is probably in the same position now that South Africa was probably in 1980, 83, 84, 85. They the apartheid regime in South Africa finally collapsed after the Soviet Union collapsed, which was in 1991. So they're probably 7 years out from a major political collapse of their society. I mean, there's people in the street right now rioting against or protesting against Netanyahu to get him out of office because they really don't want to fight either, right? They'd rather be up there writing Python, writing code in Python, or playing Xbox or something like that. Or even getting on Instagram and looking at chicks, man. They're not really interested in getting into a big conflict. And so people don't really want to be dragged into conscript, into the military, just to fight a war that, this joker in office is trying to leverage to keep himself in power. There's two ways how this can play out. Before I peel up out of here, there's two ways how this can play out. One, this will cost Biden the election if he doesn't do anything about it. And two, if Trump was to come into power, it would probably benefit Netanyahu because Trump would probably not be interested in getting involved, right? Because he's taking a more isolated approach. And so this works for Netanyahu to get rid of Biden and replace him with Trump from a PR standpoint, so he can maintain his himself in power in Israel. Now, here's the flip side of this. Netanyahu called Trump. Sorry, let me say that again. Netanyahu called Biden to congratulate him in 2020 of his victory against Trump. Trump didn't like that. Trump was on record a few weeks ago, if not a month or so ago. Actually, it was a few weeks ago on the campaign trail saying, you know, he supports the security of Israel, but all that killing, unjustified killing in Gaza, is something that he does not support. And so that kind of pissed Netanyahu off. And so I think there's a lot of fragility in Israel right now. Most settler colonial societies are very, very fragile because it's not built, the foundation is not strong to begin with. United States is like this too, right? We saw what happened on January 6th, how fragile the system is because people who happen to be Anglo-Saxon, who are dissatisfied with the system, will try to overturn the government. And then you go back to the Civil War for slavery, and you see how easily fragile the country is in terms of its stability. It can potentially be overturned with enough people. Okay. And so I'm adding all that in so that you have an understanding that Israel is in a downward spiral, no different than apartheid South Africa in the 1980s. Okay. This is what, you know, a downward spiral looks like. Always starting conflict, you know, unjustifiably killing people, innocent civilians and stuff like that. That happened in South Africa too. They were killing a lot of black people down there. Okay. A lot of black folks were getting torn out the frame down there when de Klerk was in power in his final days. They were jacking black people up down there. Okay. They were fighting back, but they were still getting jacked up. And so if it wasn't for the Cuban government under Fidel Castro coming in to dismantle and demilitarize the South African, the apartheid South African military, we probably would be having a different conversation. Okay. A lot of outside help came in ways that I don't even think that Kissinger and the rest of the State Department could have imagined could change the trajectory of the battlefield. So what's going on, Nagone? Oh, wait, can anybody hear me?
Oh, hey, Mike. Hey, Mike,
Oh,
how
what's
you
going
doing?
on? Oh, what's going on, bro?
Pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. I was just listening up. You know, just looking at this here real quick.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very interesting kind of maneuver. It looks like it's going to take 8 or 9 hours for those drones to get there. This is a kind of a level 2 response. This is not a quick, fast response here. This is going to take a while. So I suspect this is going to try to open up some other lines of communication between both of them as they kind of talk this out as these drones fly over. I mean, Israel does have their Iron Dome and all that, as we spoke about, and so they can kind of get these out of the air. But this is, I think, a method of dialogue. I definitely think that Netanyahu, he's going to have to talk. I know we got back channels going on with the United States. Netanyahu has his own interest to kind of keep this alive, but let's see if they really are looking to push this up even further, because this could seriously escalate. So this is, it's a retaliation, but it's also kind of a pause, if you will, in getting a further dialogue going from what I could really read. But this is but this could escalate. This could deeply escalate, and whatever plans that I would say Netanyahu has, and how America is now stepping in, and a few others, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays in the back channel. And time is ticking.
So, Royalty, what's going on, bro?
Hey, what's going on, Mike? What's going on, Nagone?
What's going on, Joe?
Sean, bro, what's your take on this?
So, my take on this is that my belief was that when Israel attacked the consulate in Damascus, this is what they wanted. They knew Iran was going to retaliate, because the Iranians for many, many years have been, they've been very very patient with the response, but they knew that an attack on the continent was going to force the Iranians to attack.
For sure.
And 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 the thing is this, okay? So let's go back to what's going on in terms of Gaza and what's going on in terms of southern Lebanon. Israel has done war games where if they go to war against Hezbollah, they would lose. They knew this. They knew that, okay, if we go to war against Hezbollah, they would lose. So for Netanyahu, because we have to keep it with Netanyahu. Netanyahu, he has a lot of corruption, cases against him. He knows that if this war ends, that he's going to go to jail, and his political career is over, and his name will be sullied in Israeli history. So the best thing for him is to escalate. So for Netanyahu, bombing the Iranian consulate in Damascus was going to force an Iranian response, and now the ball's on Israel's court. And if Israel attacks Iranian soil directly, then it's an all-out war. It's an all-out war. The Iranians have said it themselves that this is just a taste of what's to come, and that if Israel attacks Iran, that the retaliation is going to be much, much, much worse. I mean, this attack that we see today was hundreds of drones, hundreds of missiles. I mean, if Israel does something stupid, we're talking about tens of thousands of missiles, because Iran has tens of thousands of missiles. Hezbollah has tens of thousands of missiles. The Houthis have tens of thousands of missiles. I mean, Iran, we've talked about this in the past. They could shut down the Straits of Hormuz, which alone would be catastrophic. So Netanyahu wants to do this because he knows that maybe if America gets involved, that can save his hide. I don't think, to me, it's a miscalculation, because Biden, let's be real. The war in Gaza is killing Biden. It's killing Biden. A war against Iran on the behalf of Israel would basically confirm that he's going to lose the election. So how Israel's going to respond is going to be interesting, because if Israel retaliates and Iran unleashes, the dogs of war on Israel, what is Biden going to do? To me, I don't know what Biden's going to do, because in the one hand, his rhetoric is like, he's hard on Netanyahu, he's hard on Israel, but then he approves of, weapons to Israel, and he said that the United States support of Israel is ironclad. So to me, I don't know. Netanyahu has a lot of interest to expand this war, because his war in Gaza has failed. It's been a catastrophe. He has not destroyed Hamas. Hamas is in the tunnels. They're doing guerrilla attack. This is guerrilla warfare 101. They're not gaining. They're not releasing the hostages. They haven't destroyed Hamas. They haven't destroyed none of the senior members of Hamas. And if they're going against Hezbollah, that's essentially going to end Israel as a state. So this is the gamble of bombing Iran's consulate was a desperate gamble to try to get the United States involved. But I don't see us getting involved, because we've talked about this in the past. War games against Iran is not something. To put it mildly, Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Iraq. This is a whole nother ballgame. This is not a war that's in our interest at all. Economically, militarily, this is not in our interest. And I believe, many of the smart people that's in the Defense Department and the State Department know this, but I don't know. Biden says he's a Zionist. I don't know.
I mean, a lot of people say, Biden, his mind is gone, and then people say, he's a Zionist. He said himself that he's a Zionist, but they also say he's the mastermind for taking things down. He's incompetent to lead. I don't. You can't really always take those things into, as you got to take it with a grain of salt. Is basically what I'm saying. But I don't think that the White House wants to get involved in anything right now. It's a campaign season. They're what, 6 months out or 5 months out from go time. they don't really want to get involved in that, right? Not while he's sitting in office. Now, if this was like 2020 or 2021, then that would be different. But in 2024, I don't think they really want to get involved. I think that they want to de-escalate this as much as possible. I don't think that they can afford, everybody in the region can't afford the insurance rates that's about to go up on shipping, because insurance is high in Israel right now because there's so much conflict going on there that they can't get anything safely through, because Yemen, the Houthis, and Salah is keeping those container ships pinned down there, and forcing them to take alternative routes, like go around, South Africa, or even offload some of that stuff to Durban, and maybe bring it up the Atlantic and then bring it up to the Mediterranean, which is a long, long route, but it's the cost of doing business with Israel. And so I don't think that folks really want to get into another conflict like this. Russia is one thing, but because that's further away. But to get into one with Iran, Iran has their tentacles spread pretty far, even in Africa now. Iran has some pretty deep reach. So I think overall, Israel is really in a death spiral right now, and I don't think that they're going to be able to get out of it, because the state is collapsing. Even though the people on the ground may be big advocates for Zionism, I don't see how you can get out of this situation with Gaza, with the Palestinians, because of all those deaths, right? 30,000, 35,000 dead at this point. How do you walk away for that? From a corporate standpoint, we may not want to do business with Israeli startups or Israeli companies. We may not want to be involved in, any sort of conferences that are going on in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, for that matter. May not want anything to do with that. And so a lot of companies may start backing out. And I think that, a lot of countries are going to start backing away as well. I mean, I think that, the South African foreign minister, Dr. Nabali, I think that she is pretty much the spearhead behind making sure that the AU has a strong distance away from Israel at this point. Even though Israel wants to be an observing member, there's no real reason to have them as an observing member. They all those killing all those Palestinians. When we talk about Palestinians, it's really important that people understand it's not just, brown people being killed. There's Africans being killed in Palestine too. A lot of those people are Africans too, because they've been forced to live in these conditions. If you ever watched, Abby Martin's documentary on Gaza, you'll see that there are definitely melanated people who look just like African Americans who are Palestinian. And they are some of the ones being worse, have the worst impact on the ground. And so I don't know, from a corporate standpoint, from a social impact standpoint, I think a lot of folks really are backing away from Israel. And this is kind of what South Africa went through in the late 80s. A lot of companies started backing away. A lot of countries started backing away. I know Germany's backing Israel pretty strongly right now, but Nicaragua has that case against at the ICJ against Germany for being complicit in all of this. And so this has become a legal fight, and it's become a drone war. Those are my final thoughts on this. I think that Israel's on their way out. I don't imagine that Israel is going to survive past 2035. I think the state is pretty much done. Any closer thoughts, Nagom?
That's very interesting. It's very interesting. I'm looking at this, trying to put a lot of this together. As far as what Zoe said, as far as Hezbollah, these guys being wiped out, that has not happened. We know that certainly the conflict before with respect to Lebanon didn't really go well for them either. We're talking about earlier. For Israel, there are a lot of things that are just not going super well for them. To expand this conflict and really light up the Middle East even more is just not within a lot of some of the more powerful nations' interest at this stage as well. So this, Netanyahu really trying to press this, and they knew this was going to happen. They knew this attack was coming. That's for sure. They knew it. And Iran said, we are going to retaliate. We're going to respond. So I'm thinking at a certain level, which may sound a little outside of this, but I actually think this is what's called almost, I don't know another term for it, almost aggressive dialogue. Let's see really what goes on here. But Israel is not in a very strong position. And as much as the United States, Biden, them is, kind of sitting back saying they don't want to get involved, I think squeezing the nuts of really squeezing the coliones of Israel. And Netanyahu is going to really start to ratchet up over the next few hours, and we'll see what really happens then. I don't suspect we're going to see anything land, really, but really expanding this conflict greater is not within the interest, certainly not only of the United States, Biden, but of Israel as well. And Mike, will they not survive until 2035? That's a big question, because if you do light up that whole region, it would look to me that as the Israel, if they don't go full nuke and try to knock everybody out of the box, that they will be finished. So this is a somewhat of a frightening prospect. So I think that things are going to really ratchet up quickly to kind of settle this issue a little faster than some might like to see it done. So that's my view on it. Thanks, Mike.
So,
Well, the way I see it is that I mean that there's been some reports in Israeli media that the Israeli cabinet has approved of a harsh retaliation against Iran. So we'll see what happens in that regard. But just like what Nagon said, this is a very serious issue because of Israel's nuclear weapons, and they do have that Samson doctrine, and this is something very serious, and we cannot take it lightly. And for me, the way I see it is like somebody has to get a hold of Israel's nuclear weapons at this point. And another thing too is that after October 7th, a lot of Israelis have stated that they lost deterrence. So now they're more emboldened to attack Iran, to go full scale against Hezbollah, because they feel uh, this is colonial settler mindset that we lost deterrence because what Hamas has done in October 7th. So they have to go against Iran, they have to go against Hezbollah in order to get that deterrence. And what Biden will do, I don't know. We can say it's an election year, but let's be real. The Israelis have bragged that Biden, whatever Biden stated, they've ignored. Biden told them not to launch a ground incursion into Gaza. They did it anyway. Biden has told them not to get into Rafah. They're going to go into Rafah anyway. Even though they've been bogged down in Khan Yunis for 4 months, but the Israelis want to finish the job in Rafah. And let's be real, if you look at Israeli politics, Netanyahu's regime is full of not even far right wing, ultra right wing Israelis who have told them, like, listen, if you don't go into Rafah, if you don't go against Hezbollah, we're going to walk away from this government, and your government will collapse and you will go to jail. So for Netanyahu, escalation is the only game. So we're in a very, very, dangerous time. And I don't know. I really don't know how Israel responds. If Israel retaliates and Iran, because let's be real, what Iran did today was with a few hundred missiles and drones, and with coordination with the axis of resistance from Yemen, Iraq, and Lebanon. If Israel attacks Iran proper, then all bets are off. And I don't know. Will Biden let Israel get pummeled? To me, the way I see it, I don't think he will allow that, because in the one hand, a lot of people in the State Department know if you let Israel get pummeled, they might go for the nukes. And I think we may try to intervene just to prevent that from happening. I'm not trying to be fear mongering, but everything that we've seen from October 7th till now has just been the worst case scenario. So it remains to be seen. But if Israel gets pummeled by Iran, we will, the way I see it from Biden is that we will risk a war with Iran than let Israel use their nukes, because then all bets are off. So that's my final thoughts, not to be fear mongering.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button on the way out. Share the video.